The recap is brought to you by General Effect Media. Be sure to follow and subscribe to GEM for reviews, breakdowns, rankings, and other podcasts such as Bring It In. We've also introduced the 2023 DCI Score Dashboard by bandscores.net and a new article series called Back of the Bus. Be sure to check out all of that and more on General Effect Media. It's the recap for Wednesday, July 26, 2023, the year of our Zeets, 9 p.m. in the Superior Time Zone. I'm your host, Daniel Montoya Jr., and I got an email. I get text messages, direct messages, etc., asking questions or suggesting topics, and someone said, would the world care to hear the stories the subcaptions tell? Is it really about they gotta play better? Or is it the subcaptions say, wait, they ain't really got anything to play? That might not be too muddy. That might be too muddy. And it got me thinking that there's a lot of people out there that don't understand what the subcaptions are in the recaps, what the boxes are, what the ranges are, all of those things. So I thought today, in addition to a movie review at the end of this episode, I would talk a little bit about subcaptions and tenths. Some people call it the power of the tenth. Some people call it the value of a tenth. So first, let's talk about boxes and their terms as it pertains to Drum Corps International, Bands of America, and Winter Guard International. Now, in DCI, we have 5 boxes. We actually have 5 boxes in all 3 of the main circuits, all right? And if you remember these terms, going from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we have rarely, sometimes, usually, consistently, and always. So box 1, rarely. Box 5, always. Box 3, usually, right? So box 3 is like a nice mid, and you get those jokes about, oh, that's box 5, or oh, that's box 1, or whatever. But the way DCI does it is you get a total score of 100 on each of your sheets, right? You get 100 points on the left side of the sheet. You get 100 points on the right side of the sheet. You total up from 200, and then I think you divide by 2 or some crazy math, and then GE counts for more than music and blah, 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 blah. But that's not what we're talking about today. Now, if you get anywhere between 1 and 29 points, you are in box 1. That's rarely. If you get anywhere between 30 and 49, that's box 2. Box 3 usually is 50 to 69. Consistently, box 4, 70 to 89, and always box 5 is 90 to 100. Now, when it comes to the sheets themselves, you will often hear people refer to the left side of the sheet versus the right side of the sheet. On the effect sheets, the left side is repertoire effect, and on the right side of the sheet, you get performance effect. And then in the other captions, you have content on the left and you have achievement on the right. Now, this is a really basic way of describing it, but the left side of the sheet tends to be what are you doing, right? It is the what versus the how on the right side. How are you doing it? So the left is, what is it that you're doing? What is it you're trying to tell me? What are the skills that you're showing? What are the technique, blah, blah, blah. And on the right side is, how are you actually pulling it off? If we were to look at the DCI general effect sheet, on the left side, you have audience engagement, audiovisual coordination, programming, interpretation, variety of effects, creativity, originality, and artistry. If you go to the right side of the sheet, it talks about engaging the audience. Do you deliver and sustain the effects? Do you embody, sustain character, role, identity, style? And then do you communicate detail, nuance, and artistic qualities? Now, remember those terms we talked about earlier? If you were to say you rarely engage the audience, you're box 1. If you sometimes deliver or sustain the effects, you're box 2. If you usually embody or sustain the character, role, identity, style, you're box 3. If you consistently communicate detail, nuance, and artistic qualities, you're box 4. But if you always do it, you are box 5. So you have the left side of the sheet, you have the right side of the sheet, you have the what, and then you have the how. That's the real basic way of talking about it. Now, in addition to all this stuff, there is judges training, right? There are handbooks, there are PDFs, there are all these things that judges are supposed to do based on how the designers, how the admin, how the staff, how the drum corps vote at January. Every 2 years, there are different proposals, different restrictions, different liberties, blah, 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 blah. Happens every 2 years. This is not the point of this podcast. The point is everyone gets together, they have a meeting, and they talk about it. And in the 2016 Drum Corps International, philosophy of the scoring system is what it says. And you can find this, I found it. In number 9, it says, each subcaption is subject to ranking and rating. The final total for each sheet should reflect the combination of subcaptions compared to all other units in the competition. While subcaption ties are possible, parentheses, and a subcaption tie may in some cases be purposeful, end parentheses, it is preferred that bottom line ties don't occur, emphasis mine. Judges must re-examine the subcaptions in the event of an initial bottom line tie. By re-examining each subcaption, judges may see a possible change in a subcaption that would break the bottom line tie. The half-tenth, 0.5, allows a judge to separate units if the two units are essentially barely different. The half-tenth should not be used with the first unit in the competition. The use of the half-tenth may allow judges to apply the hierarchy of the judge's responsibilities more completely. The half-tenth adds a level of refinement to the judge's tools. However, its use should be judicious and is carefully considered as any other tool available in the ranking and ratings process. Now, that's what DCI says you're supposed to do. All right. Now, I have many anonymous people, as I've mentioned, that send me things and I ask questions. And in the interest of full disclosure, anonymity is promised for this information. And one person who is a former marcher, a former teacher, former designer, current designer, someone who has been in all facets of the activity, said to me, one big thing is the tenths relationship is bottom line only. Now, in the winter, and we'll talk about this in a minute, it's subcaptions, so you'll see bigger spreads. DCI doesn't, quote, care, end quote, about subcaption ties, parentheses, they prefer you don't, end parentheses. But it's bottom line that they care most about. All right. And so this person is suggesting that maybe subcaptions don't really matter at all. That's why you'll see in some of these things that there are subcaption ties, even though there's 4 or 5 groups, or you'll see them so very close. The left and the right sheet are the exact same, or they're slightly different, or they're not different enough. Now, when we talk about what other circuits do, and I'm coming back to this because this is very important. In DCI and WGI, we have the value of the 10th, the power of the 10th. And full disclosure, I judge for BOA. I judge for WGI. I've judged for all local circuits around the country. Whoever wants to pay me to come and do all that stuff, we do that kind of stuff. Now, when we go to WGI, the sheets, which you can find online, you can see something called subcaption spreads. And at the bottom, they'll say, if there are 1 or 2 percentage points, that's very comparable. That's an almost like you play 10 times, 5 out of 10 times, it's going to go different ways or whatever. I don't know. If you see 3 to 4 tenths difference, there's minor differences. If you see 5 to 7 points, that's definitive. And if you see 8 or higher, that's significant differences. If you see 8 points or higher differences in tenths, they're not in the same neighborhood. They're not even in the same city. All right. That's kind of how the power of the 10th works. In Bands of America, we have similar stuff. Now, remember, we have those same words. Rarely, maybe it's infrequently, sometimes, usually, always. There's a slight word difference here and there on how that works, but you pretty much have that same power of the 10th. You want to maintain a spread that is consistent across the way. You can also see a different way of putting it is, if there are 1 to 3 differences, it's essentially equal. 4 to 6-ish, subtle differences. 7 to 9-ish, some significant differences. 10 plus, many significant differences. And I realize I gave you different ranges on that, but at the end of the day, it's kind of up to the judge and how they keep their neighborhoods, how they keep their spreads, how they keep their relationships. Now, I said just a second ago, what does DCI say they do? Now, before we get to what DCI actually does, a different person who will remain nameless, but they were another person that marched, that taught, that designed, all that good stuff, blah, 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 talked about the power of the 10th. And I asked this person to confirm some of the stuff I had heard. And they said, yes, the 10th in DCI, that is correct. This person said that they had a huge debate about it this January at the Janual. And they brought it up about judges matching both boxes, meaning rep and achievement or content and achievement rather, or rep and performance were the same. There was no difference in ordinal for every group. Now, what do I mean by that? All right. If we go to the 2019 DCI Southwestern Championship, which was San Antonio, Texas, and you can look this up, but I'm not going to name names, but you can kind of go look at it. Go look at certain judges' recaps from top to bottom. And if we're going on it, I'm going to look at one particular judge here. You have second, first, third, six, four, five, etc., etc. You can look at these ordinals from rep and performance or content and achievement, and especially in effect, they're pretty much the same way. You can look at certain judges who kind of just did that thing, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, whatever the order was, and that's what they ended up doing. So at this meeting in January, the Janual, this was talked about, and I guess somebody leading the judges stuff said, "You don't like that?" And everyone said no. And I suppose there was a demonstration. This person brought up two different recaps. And one recap was the 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, etc. And the other one was sort of that zip codey subcaption recap that we're used to getting in WGI and to some extent BOA. And the person asked, well, what do you prefer? And it was unanimous that everybody liked the zip codey subcaption breakdown. Now, I said, what does DCI do? That's what DCI was doing at that time. Now, if we were to look at the recap from this year's DCI Southwestern Championship, which is a comparable show, basically 2019 to 2023, if you look at the subcaptions, you start to see a little bit more zip codey stuff. For example, Blue Devils have a 1 and then a 2, Boston 3, 2. Then you have a 5, 3, 7, 6. Like you start to see these, a 10, a 13, an 18, 15. You have all these different, I like to call them zip codies. I'm not the only one, but you have this person saying, well, in rep, you're 5th, but the way you're performing it, you're 7th. And so we start to see a little bit of a bigger shift. It's not perfect yet. And do I think Blue Devils could be first, second and everything? Yeah, absolutely. That's just how some things work. But for the most part, you should see some wildly different ordinals in the left sheet to the right sheet. Now, typically what you want is your left side, your rep or your content, to be higher than what your performance or achievement is. You basically want a lot of room to grow. For example, if we look at and this is just the way the judges scored this. This is not me editorializing. I'm just showing you what they said. The Boston Crusaders on Greg Lasserre's GE1, he said that they are in 3rd place for rep, but 2nd in performance, right? They have a higher performance than they do rep. So to him, the Boston Crusaders are outperforming their design. If you go to W. Rickart, also in GE, they have a 9.3 in 3rd place for rep, but a 9.4 first place in performance. Both of those judges consider the Boston Crusaders to be outperforming their content. Now, if we go to Blue Coats, it's almost the same thing, but it's not. Rep 9.2. Oh, did I do that backwards? I did that backwards. Boy, nope. I'm sorry. The numbers are fine. It's the ordinals that are off. If you go to Blue Coats, 9.2 in rep, 9.0 in performance. So they're saying you have more rep, you're just not performing it right. You go to Blue Coats in the other GE score, 9.4 in rep, 9.1 in achievement or performance rather. Sorry. So you get that whole kind of thing. So you can look at the left is how much you have and the right is how well you're doing it. Sometimes you hear them say we're underwater or we're backwards. If you look at Mandarins right now, even though the ordinals are kind of wonky, what they're saying, the ordinals have them in 5th in rep, but 7th in performance, but their rep score is 8.9, their performance is 8.7. So the ordinals are all over the place. And you have certain drum corps that may be opposite, right? You have a higher rep score and a lower performance score. And ideally, at the beginning of the year, that's what you want, right? You want room to grow. If you come out the first show and they're giving you I'm going to make this up, box 3 in your rep or your content, and you're getting box 4 in achievement, to me, the judges are saying, hey, you're better than what you're playing. You're outperforming your design already. Like that's a concern. You need room to grow. So that's where you get the whole, this is where we get room to grow. So you can see how the difference between a 2019 recap and a 2022 or 23 recap gives you a little bit more of what we want in terms of, hey, give us a power of the 10th. Because, I've heard people complain about brass scores on finals night or finals week. How can the first place brass have, I'm just going to make something up here, a 9.9, and the second place brass have a 9. Everyone's separated by a 10th. Is it really that close? Can it be that close? Well, yes, the answer is yes, but there is also sometimes maybe a group is that much stronger than others. Like if Blue Devils, for example, let's look at Blue Devils. Actually, let's look at Cavaliers percussion. Cavaliers percussion, they won first in San Antonio. They have a 9.4, 9.3. That's number one. If we go to the second place in content, that would be the Blue Devils, 9.3. So we have 9.4 to 9.3. If we go to second in performance, which is the Boston Crusaders, they have a 9.15. The Cavaliers have a 9.3. That is in that minor differences range. But it's further apart than what the Judge Brooks considered was a very similar content, very close between the Cavaliers and the Blue Devils. Now, if we want to go into something a little bit more like some significant, the Cavaliers and the Cadets are separated by 0.3 in content. So there's a larger gap between the Cavaliers and the Cadets, 9.3, 9.1 in achievement. It's closer, right? And one can look at like, what's the difference in the judge's eyes, in this particular judge, Jay Brooks, in percussion between a first place drumline or percussion rather, and a 12th place percussion. Well, they're right next to each other. The Cavaliers 9.4 in content, the Blue Stars 8.4 in content. That's 12th place. That's a whole point. Remember, we talked about anything over 8 to 10 is significant. It is very significant. You look at the achievement, it's the exact same, 9.3, 8.3. So what the judge is saying is there are significant differences between the Cavaliers percussion and the Blue Stars percussion. So that's when we get into a power of a 10th, right? If you think 1 to 3 tenths, to me, it's like 1 to 3 tenths, pretty close. Right, 1 to 3, as we say. Well, actually, WGI says 1 to 2 is very comparable. Again, 3 to 4 minor, 5 to 7 definitive, 8 and higher significant. So, it's a little tighter. I think BOA gives you 1 to 2.5, if I remember correctly. I could be mistaken. But regardless, look at the powers of the 10th. The powers of the 10th will tell you, ideally, and that's if everyone is judging the way they should be based on the things I've seen. That's how it should technically work, right? Some people do it much larger. I have seen that maybe the drum corps judges in certain captions are saying 1 to 3.5 is essentially equal. 4 to 6.5 is subtle. 7 to 9.5 is some significant differences, and 10 plus many significant differences. To me, that's a really wide range. I get why they do that, but I almost feel like 3, I don't know, 3 is fine. 1 to 3, 4 to 7. Actually, that's too much. I don't know. 2 is fine. 2 is fine. 2.5. I don't know. I default just by nature to the WGI spread, since I do so many of those shows every winter or spring, as we say, because we don't have winter down here. But those subcaption spreads live in my mind, those differences. And so as you look at the recap, and maybe you've always wondered, like, what does this mean? Why is it this way? Left side of the sheet, the what? Right side of the sheet, the how. And then you look at the tenths and you go like, well, they're pretty close. Like if we go to brass, let's look at brass, because people love looking at brass. Boston Crusaders, 9.25, 9.0. That's first place. All right. In content, 9.25 for Boston, 9.2 to Carolina Crown. They're saying Boston's content is essentially equal. It's a toss-up to Carolina Crown. However, they said Paul McGarr, the achievement 9.0 for first place. Crown was fourth with 8.8. Still essentially equal, just a larger on that lower end, or getting closer to more subtle differences, getting closer to what WGI would call minor differences, right? So basically, between the first and the fourth place brass sections, Paul McGarr was saying that they're very comparable, essentially equal. On any given night, anything can happen, which is, I think, why they want to do the average of the 3 nights at DCI finals week, so they can create, best brass, best percussion, best guard. But that's not my decision. I'd love to talk about that later on. So anyway, this is a very basic clarification, definition of the power of the 10th, how all that works. I just thought that was something cool to talk about, especially as we get a little bit nerdier into who's going to make finals, who's not going to be finals. Like, it's easy for me to look at the general larger captions, just say general effect as one thing. But if you look at the San Antonio and any regional, you have 4 GE judges. You have 2 GE judges with emphasis on visual, And then you have 2 GE judges with emphasis on music, right? So you can look at it, if you're looking at left to right on the DCI website, Greg Lasser, W. Rickhart, they're the visual emphasized GE judges. Mark McGahey, Dave Carbone, those are the music emphasized general effect judges. So you can look across, you can see where some of the neighborhood stuff is happening. If I'm being just based on what I read, and I know Dave Carbone, and I'm colloquial, I don't know what the word is. I'm not friends with Mark McGahey, but I know who he is, right? You could look at the visual judges who are a little more zip codey, right? I'm just reading left to right. You have like a 5, 7, 6, 6, 5, 6, and you get to the music people 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Right? 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. It seems like the music judges, in effect, in San Antonio were a little bit more straight across the board. They felt like both content and both achievement were 9th place or 1st place or 3rd place. Whereas the visual judges, who tend to be more probably in line with the WGI stuff, though Dave Carbone is a WGI judge, the visual judges are a little closer to being zip codey. In the words of a friend, it's not perfect, but it's better. So pay attention to all these recaps. Look at the power of the 10th. If the judge is utilizing the 10th in the way they should, you can surmise whether the judge thinks they're minor differences, very comparable, definitive, significant, whatever words you want to use to describe it, essentially equal, subtle, blah, blah, blah. However you want to do it, that's the value or the power of the 10th. So as you nerd out, like a bunch of us do, and you look at the recaps, keep that in mind. Look at the left versus the right, the what versus the how. And that's kind of consistent across the 3 major circuits, whether or not everything I said is like, look, I gave you a very basic, very general, very Wikipedia-like clarification definition. If you want to know more about this, talk to your favorite designer or staff member or judge, and they can probably help you out a little bit more. This is the basic stuff. There's more nuance and subtlety with some judges. With other judges, it literally is, well, the what and the how. Flags go up, B flat major chord, fortissimo. Box 5, right? Anyway, I don't know any judges like that, do you? Hey, let's try something different. If you have any questions about this, any thoughts, etc., send me an email, therecap@generaleffect.media. Send me a message through the Spotify/Anchor app, or if you know me personally, you can email me or just text me or send me a DM. But let's try something a little bit different, a first for the recap. Earlier this afternoon, again on Wednesday, July 26, 2023, my wife and I, who I affectionately refer to as the girl because she has no social media, we went and saw Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Now, I have enjoyed all of the Mission Impossible movies ever since the first one, directed by Brian De Palma with John Voight. I haven't done a marathon of these. I should have done it. I had told myself I was going to do that before I saw this movie. It's not necessary that you saw like the first 3 or 4 or 5. Maybe you should know a little bit about the previous 1 or 2 that preceded Dead Reckoning, but that's not the point of this. The point of this is we went and saw it. I was looking forward to it. My wife and I don't normally like all the same movies or same type of movies, but she said there are 3 movies she really wanted to see this summer: Indiana Jones, Mission Impossible, and I can't remember the 3rd one. It doesn't really matter. It's not important. We didn't go see that one. We saw Mission Impossible. This is not like a review like, oh, and this and this and this. This is just some general thoughts. Number 1, I thought it was fine. It's a good summer blockbuster movie. It is no Top Gun Maverick, which affected me in ways I wasn't prepared to be affected. Any people out there with dad issues or dads who passed away will know what I'm talking about. And I don't mean bad daddy issues. I just mean, like whatever kind of stuff. Or best friends or whatever. Regardless, this was fine. It was fun. I had seen so many of the behind the scenes, like kind of thing. I'm a big Rebecca Ferguson fan. I'm a big Haley Atwell fan. And that's kind of like my second point is I've really liked Haley Atwell's work ever since I saw her in the first or second or third season of Black Mirror. If you haven't seen her, it's the one with Domhnall Gleeson, who is Hutz from the Star Wars movies, the new Star Wars. Anyway, go check it out. That's the first time I came across her, and I've seen her, going through the Agent Carter, the Marvel movies, etc. And she was really good in this movie. It's so nice to see her, as the kids say, get her flowers and get like a very large starring role. It's not a spoiler to say that I hope that they continue to utilize her, of course, not knowing what the second part 2 is about in terms of this, but she's really good. I enjoyed her role. I enjoyed Rebecca Ferguson. I enjoyed so much of the movie. One thing I did not enjoy, however, was the music. And I'm a musician. I'm a composer. I'm an arranger. I'm a conductor. I'm a snob. All right. And I cannot listen or watch anything without analyzing the music as it goes on. It's a gift and it's a curse. And this was the worst music rather, in any Mission Impossible film I have seen. I have a love-hate relationship with Hans Zimmer. I love so much of the scores that he has written. I hate that his remote control, like minions, lackeys, interns, whatever, have sort of homogenized film score music. You can tell who are like the people who maybe weren't as good in remote control, who get their own gigs, versus the ones who are really good, right? Like I believe Harry Gregson Williams is a remote control person. Fantastic. Is that the How to Train Your Dragon guy? There's a number of composers, Steve Jablonsky, that came out from the Transformers, the person who wrote Gravity, Oscar-winning composer who wrote Gravity. That person is a former remote control person. So it's not like, it was Stephen Price. It's not like he produces bad people to work on that stuff, but sometimes some people slip through the cracks slip through the cracks. And this particular person, if I can find it, I should have just had it ready for y'all to go. I think his name's like Lorne Ralph or something like that. It was Lorne Balfe or Balfe or whatever. Apparently, this is not his first movie. All right. I looked at his IMDb page to find out what he has written, the music that he has done. And, some of it's like, oh, he's got like additional music, which anything about Hans Zimmer and other film scores, like Hans will write like 90% of the score. And then he'll go like, hey, can you help me write this cue? Or maybe you do a little of this. So he gets an additional music credit. And then ideally you work enough as the assistant, the intern, the copyist, additional music, you get your own gig. I did not like this score. Two things. The person used the three things rather. Number one, it opens up with the 4/4 version of the Mission Impossible theme. And if you know about Mission Impossible theme by Lalo Schifrin, it's in 5/4. But I think U2 from the second Mission Impossible, actually it might have been the first one, put it in 4/4, dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Right, that was easy. Lauren brings it back and goes, so he does that in 4/4, which is fine, and he overuses a marching snare drum, like a Kevlar snare drum sound. So he uses that a lot, obviously uses the Mission Impossible theme. But then there's like a chord progression, which I imagine either he thought or someone told him, this needs to be our James Bond, dun, 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 which you hear all the time. But then like amazing composers like David Arnold build off of that cell and build it into an amazing piece of musical work for over 2 hours. This was not that. This was the guy just repeating the same tension chord progression over and over again, where it ceases to have tension after doing it for 2 hours, right? Like there's no development of it. If there was, it was very little. The orchestration did not change much. It was just monotonous and it was homogeneous, and there were visual changes in the score, in the movie, right? There's different locations, different scenes, different levels of tension. You wouldn't know that just by listening to it, because the music was the same chord progression, the same scoring, the same electronic sound bed. It just was not good. I don't know why this composer was chosen for it. And I know I'm not writing film music. So you're right. I'm not writing film music. But regardless, you can still critique it, right? We can, look, that's what art is. Art's there to be critiqued and enjoyed. I did not enjoy it, and I'm enjoying critiquing it, though. So all that to say is I enjoyed the movie. It was fun. I don't need to see it again. I will see the thrilling conclusion. Haley Atwell, A+. Score, man, I'm giving that a D-. They get a D- because that chord progression was okay, but they got a D- because they kept using it over and over and over again. So... All right. Well, tell me your thoughts. Mission Impossible. What do you think about that? Dead Reckoning Part 1. What are your thoughts on Haley Atwell? What are your thoughts on the power of the 10th, the value of the 10th? We are moving into the Atlanta Night Beat weekend. Then the next weekend we have the Allentown weekend, and then we're kind of it, right? Like we are full steam ahead. We have crossed the top of Mount Everest and we are coming down the hill. Not running up the hill. We already did that one there. Now we're falling down the hill. Some are falling, some are running, and some are just holding on for dear life. So love to hear what you think. about how the season's going, about the value of the 10th, about the recaps, any questions, comments, concerns, and if there's anything you want me to address on this podcast. Again, the recap at generaleffect.media.com. Send me a message, a DM, a text, whatever. And be sure to check into the Bring It In pod hosted by Matthew Carstensen. Really nerdy stuff, a little bit more in-depth, a little bit longer. They had a really great interview with former Flow Sports founding member Wesley Sullivan. He's from the Northeast, so he really gets Boston on you. Check that out. Check out our dashboard here, powered by bandscores.net, our Back of the Bus series, and all of our great articles at generaleffectmedia.substack.com. We got some really cool stuff. Check it out. Let us know what you think. All that great stuff. I'll see you after this weekend on the next episode of The Recap.